Hello there. Today we are going to paint these gorgeous sunflowers with the limited color palette from PanPastel. PanPastel does have this set available to purchase if you are desiring to try out just a few colors to see how you like it. So we have their titanium white, their Hansa yellow, permanent red, ultramarine blue, and their black. We have a couple tools here that we will use for this project. I do want to say in advance, I apologize if you hear a dog barking. My kids are playing with friends and the dog is very distressed that I did not bring them home. So to get started, I did a sketch of these flowers, and I will have the sketch as well as the reference photo link available in the link below. And this is just from a free reference photo site that I did the sketch on watercolor paper. But because I want to show you that you don't need specialty supplies to be able to try out PanPastels, I've actually printed this out on regular printer paper. It might be a little bit thicker, like a cardstock. So if you get a simple cardstock paper, it's not very thick. It's still pretty smooth. You can still accomplish a lot with this. We are actually also going to do a color testing on a simple piece of printer paper. So you can see even printer paper will take the PanPastel semi-decent. All right, before we work on our project, let's do a little bit of color experimentation. Before I do, just some tools of the trade tips. We have our soft tools here. Soft is spelled with 2 F's, and these are not necessarily dirty. They might be a little bit because I used them yesterday. They are just stained. So when you purchase soft tools, they're this nice cream tan, but the first time you use them, they will be stained, but you can continue to use them essentially until they fall completely apart. So just because they look like this does not mean that they are unusable. The other thing I want to share with you is that when you are using paper towels, if you are able, try not to use just regular paper towels. They do work, but they will ruin your tools a whole lot faster. They'll get frayed edges and they won't work so well. So if you can, avoid using regular paper towels and instead get a pack of shop towels. I think I buy maybe 1 box every year and a half. They last extremely well. So this is just a box of shop towels. I think it's called Rags in a Box is the brand that I have. But these work way better for wiping off your tools and for preserving them for the long run. All right. One other thing that I wanted to note is usually when you buy a set of PanPastels, they'll come like this with the tools underneath. This also has a colorless blender. So if you are wanting to use very thin colors and you're wanting them to blend really well, you can use a colorless blender. I honestly don't use it that much because I feel like the pastels really spread well on their own. All right, let's start putting color down here. Now the difference between PanPastels, actually I have some red on there from yesterday. I've been trying to do a limited color palette and see what the results are. And I've been very excited to see how it works. But if you ever have another color on your pastels, it happens a lot with the yellow. And you can see in here I have some as well. Not that big of a deal. You can rub it off on a paper towel if you are really worried about it. I don't mind the color differences that much. So, all right. So different than soft pastels, PanPastels are a transparent medium. They have different levels of transparency. So this yellow is very transparent, which is part of why if there's a color contamination, you can really see it. But they're transparent. So what you put on top, the underlayer will show through typically. The difference is with white. White is more opaque, less see-through. And so you will get a different result with white. And because of that, especially when I am doing a limited color palette like this, I will always start with yellow, work my way down as far as brightness goes, and work my way to doing black next. So I'll go yellow, red, blue, black, and then I'll do white last, just because of the way that they blend. Now PanPastel does have a lot of colors. I think they had 80 original colors. They've done some what would you call them, opalescent colors maybe, and now they've released 52 new colors, which I have not tried yet. But you'll be amazed if you have not tried these out yet. You'll be amazed at what you can get just from a few colors. You can end up with really beautiful artwork. All right, so right now I am just laying down a simple color wheel. I am not being picky about this. This is not going to be hung on the fridge. I'm just doing this to see how the different colors react together. I have been using PanPastels for, I believe, about 6 years now. I was extremely blessed. I had an aunt that lent me her PanPastels to try. I know it can be kind of scary to invest in a new art supply that you haven't tried yet, which is part of why I am so excited to do a series just with one set that's very small, so you can see if you like them or not. I originally tried PanPastels because when I first started drawing and painting, I used colored pencils, and I was hoping that the PanPastels would work as an underlayer so I wouldn't have to use so much of my pencils, because if you've used pencils, you know it takes a long time. And so I tried them underneath, and then I fell in love and decided that this was my favorite medium. I've tried all sorts of media, painting, drawing, and I always come back to PanPastels as my favorite. One thing to note though is that when I first used PanPastels, to me it looked like a disaster on the page. I did not know what I was doing. It certainly was nothing like using pencils, and I thought it was terrible. There was no way I could learn how to use them. But because I was borrowing them, I knew I had to give it a really good try before I gave up. And so I tried again, and thankfully I did, because like I said, they became my favorite medium to work with. Sometimes I do use soft pastels over the top. Sometimes I use it with other mixed media like Chinese ink or water miscible oil. I really like with them. So there are definitely fun mixed media applications that you can use with this, but they are just a beautiful medium on their own. Now, one thing I wanted to cover, we talked a little bit about it as I shared the sketch. Paper does matter with PanPastels. It is not, when I say that, I am certainly not saying you need to use this type of paper and no other. What I'm saying is that you need to think about the result you want to get and how you like to work to decide if you want to use a smoother paper or if you want to use a paper that is sanded or has more texture. So texture is what will grip the pastel. I am just using this as a plain old generic printer paper, and you can see that no matter how thick I try to put this on, it is saturated. It's not going to take any more. That's not going to get any richer in color. Instead, it's just going to kick off some more dust over here. So that is about as far as I can go with this. Now, where you do want a smoother paper is if you do like blending. So if you have a paper that holds a lot of pastel, which I love to use like pastel mat or sanded paper if I'm working on a commission or I know that I want to use a lot of layers to get the results I'm looking for. That is great for that, but it does take a lot of pastel to get it to the results that you want. So like when I said that first experiment that I had with PanPastel, how it looked terrible, I was doing it on a sanded paper, and I did not yet understand that it was going to take a couple of layers before it actually started looking nice. So the difference with a smoother paper is you do get that instant gratification, and you get that that result of, hey, I put the color on the page and I want to leave it just the way it is. So as you can see, even though the paper couldn't hold any more of a singular color, I can still blend on it. So I can still get this darker color and see what it looks like with the other colors. So even though I can't get a richer color that the pastels are known for, I mean, you see how rich that red is and how light it is on the paper. Even though I can't get more color on it, I can blend the colors that I do have, if that makes sense. So depending on how you like to work, will determine what paper you should choose when you're trying it out. I think, like I said, this is on a cardstock, and I think it accepts pastel very well, but that is for very little blending and for laying in fun colors. I'm not looking for realism. I'm not looking for detail. I'm really just putting colors on the page and letting them shine. If you like to work in detail, then I recommend a sanded paper or pastel mat. There's several brands out there. If you look for pastel paper, you're going to get a lot of options. All right. I want to try the white as well. So I've already shown you just grab color and clean it off on the paper towel. If you are finding a problem with contaminating the color that you want, for example, say I have to go back into yellow after using the black, I could always just use the other side. There's nothing that says I can't do that. Let's see if I have, okay, so I wiped it off well enough that there's no mixing in the pan. There is nothing wrong with mixing in the pan. You certainly can. I just recommend, if you do, that you go light to dark. And if you want to clean it out, like there's blue here from the last time I painted, all you do is just wipe it away. So even if you accidentally mix your colors, it's not the end of the world. Now, one thing that might make you a little afraid to try these is the price point. I'm not sure at this point how much just this small set is, but I do believe if you buy one color at a time, it can be about $8. But I need you to understand here that I have had the same pastels for the entire 6 years that I have been focusing on painting and drawing, and I'm using the exact same set. I have one color that I have purchased to replace, which is turquoise, that I use all the time. And technically, I'm still not out of the original one. I just bought the other one extra early. So if you see that price point and you're thinking, there's no way I want to try that at $8 a piece, you have to understand. If you buy this, this is probably, if you're a hobbyist or if you like to dabble, this is the one that you're going to have the rest of your life. If you are a professional artist that is trying these out and you decide you love them, it's still going to be probably several years before you need to replace them. At least that's been the case for me. And I have made quite a lot of paintings and quite a lot of large paintings with them. So depending on how much you use, they should last a long time. And if you do buy a set, of course, you don't need to buy the set again. You can always just buy the individual color that you've run out of. All right, I am going to go grab a charcoal and a China marker. Now, because the paper, even though the paper I'm using for the sketch will hold more than this, it's still not going to hold a great deal. Like I said, this is not about blending. This is not about getting realistic. So I probably won't use black very much, and I probably won't use white very much. What I will use when I need to go darker is a tad bit, or I'll use the China marker or the charcoal, because even when the paper is saturated with the PanPastel, you can still draw on it. So you can see it still holds a little bit more, just not more of the PanPastel. All right, who is ready to begin? So I have this cute little vase of sunflowers. And like I said before, we are not going realistic. I am not looking to blend the perfect brown or the perfect green out of these colors. I'm actually going to try to put them on pretty purely. So this will be very much a primary color painting, a primary palette. So I'm gonna go ahead with my lightest color and be a little free. I'm not going to try to color in the lines. I'm really just filling in color, and I'm going to do it in different directions because that's what's going to give us a little bit of fun movement. And you know what? I think I'm going to make the middles reddish orange, so I'm not going to worry about covering over them at all. I would love if you have tried PanPastels. I would love to know what your feelings are about them. If you tried them and you couldn't stand them after this video, are you thinking maybe you'll try again? If you haven't tried them yet, what questions do you have before you are ready to give it a try? I have seen a few times in some of the PanPastel groups I'm in that somebody will go out and they'll buy the full set and they'll try it and they just can't seem to get the hang of it. They didn't like how they work. And I think there's a little bit of a learning curve just in, like I said, you need to understand what paper you're using and why and how you like to work. So I have two polar opposite ways that I like to work. I like to work really loose and free. And so if I'm doing that, I'm working on a smooth page like this, where I know I'm not going to have detail. I know that I'm not working on blending. I just want bright color. And so if that's the case, typically I'll use a watercolor paper or like a Reeves BFK printmaking paper is one that I've come to love. So I will use a paper like that. But if I am, like I said, doing a commission, if I want a few layers, I want the option to blend, then I will use a pastel mat or I believe it's a Canson paper. I can't remember which one though. I think it's Canson Mitant. I will use one of their papers that has the grit to hold the pastel on there. And so it really depends on what you're looking for and what you like to do. These are extremely gorgeous, vibrant, and easy to apply. But if you're a person who really loves detail and going slow and steady and blending, you're not going to want to try it on a paper like this because you just will not get the blending that you like. And if you like, to be loose and free and you lay a color down and you want it to stay there, you're not going to like a pastel mat or one of the sanded papers that you have to get a few layers before you can really blend. So that's my thoughts on why some people try it and decide they don't like it. It has more to do with the paper and knowing yourself and how you like to work. One other thing that I was thinking about is you can go back and forth with these. So this was a little more red than I wanted. I wanted it more orange. So even though you can't add too many layers, I'm going to add some yellow on top. And I might add a little blue in later to bring a little bit more brownness to these. Almost forgot the one on the bottom. One thing that I feel like is difficult to learn as an artist, and I still struggle with it, is when you lay down a mark to leave it and not worry about what it looks like. Don't prejudge it. Let it sit on the paper for a little bit before you start blending everything out and trying to make it look just right. And did I get the right shape? Because that is where, if you are looking for a realistic style, you'll find it by laying layer after layer after layer of marks on the page. So even with this, even though we can't get layers in the typical sense, I'm still getting layers in the, I don't know, quick sense. So instead of trying to frame out each little petal, I am going to have some loose marks and I'm not changing them. So even though I may not like this little mark right here and oh, that looks weird right there, I'm actually not going to go in and change them, because at the end, those marks are what's going to make it feel more like a flower, more than any blending, any detail that I can add is actually going to take away from a lot of the realism. So I was one who I blended everything out. I would spend a long time taking each color, mixing it on a printer paper, which you can do. You can mix your colors on the printer paper and then move it from the printer paper onto your painting if you're looking for a specific color. But I would spend forever doing that. And in the end, it looked exactly like the photo. I got what I wanted, but it just felt a little lifeless. You know, excuse me, you might as well buy the photo because the painting isn't that much different. And so even though I love realism, I still like to accomplish realism, I definitely do it in a more artistic way now, not trying to make it look just like the photo, not blending every little bit of my own hand out of it, but letting the marks tell the story as well of the painter and the viewer, instead of trying to be so perfect about it. So I would encourage you in that if you are working along with me, whether you drew your own picture, whether you're using the template that I have, however you're working, let your marks just sit there for a little bit and try to cover everything on the page before you go in and blend anything, because once you have color on the page, your opinions change, and what you might have blended out to make it look perfect before, you probably will realize later, oh no, I actually really love the way that mark helps the painting. So little thoughts that I have on painting, how I used to work versus how I work now. So these are, I feel like with the lines that I already have in the background, they look enough like sunflowers. I don't need to worry about, oh, you know, is this looking quite right? I'm kind of doing something that I'm not sure I'll like in the end. So I'm making most of my marks very similar, and that may come back to bite me later. You do want to vary your marks more than I am right now. And by varying your marks, I mean, you know, do some triangle shapes, do some lines, get some thicker marks in there. And I think as I get pastel more fully on the page, where I want to add more will be more clear. So I'm not too worried about it right now, but please know I am not filling in the lines. When we are done with adding color, I will go in, like I said, probably with the charcoal, and I'll bring out the parts that I want to bring out from this drawing. Keep in mind that this is an experiment, an experience, one could say. I am not looking for this to be something that I keep forever. It's really just to play with a limited color palette to try out PanPastels. So if this ends in disaster, you know what? I can just print another. So, and I can do things differently the next time. So I don't want you to feel like this is too precious and you're too afraid to make a mark. Literally, just restart the video, try again, print another page. Don't count this as too precious or more precious than it is. Now I am adding a little bit of color in the background, and as I add more color here, I'll know where I want it to be more yellow, more red, more blue. So I do want the background to be more blue, but I don't want it to be only blue. So that's my thoughts right now, is I'm just adding a little yellow because I don't want it to be only blue. The other thing is, in the reference photo, the light is coming from the the bottom left side of the page. So I think I'll add a little bit more yellow to this side of the table, as if that is light on there. So I'm not necessarily looking to make this realistic, but I still want that that, I don't know, realism feel to it. If I get something that's off, I'm not gonna worry about it, but I want a little taste of this came from real life. All right. I'm liking where that's going. The pot, I think what I'm going to do is I like in the reference photo that it's a white. And what I see is, because the light is coming from this way, the reflections on it are actually a cooler blue, and on this side they have the warmth. So I am going to emphasize that a little bit more. And so I'm going to put yellow on this side, but instead of getting more color, I'm just using the color that I've applied elsewhere. So if you need to pull some out of one of these spots over here, or if you need to put a little color on your sponge and wipe off some of it so that it's not quite so in your face, feel free to do that. But I'm going to add in, let's see, there's like a shadow under here, but I don't want the full color on my sponge. I want to keep it pretty transparent and light. All right, there's like more of a reflection over here. And see, I'm not worried about, I have those marks there that were accidental, but I kind of like them. I'm going to leave them the way they are. So just because something isn't in your reference photo doesn't mean that you have to erase it. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. Maybe it's a mark that you like. And so even if I didn't like this mark, I would leave it there until later to see if it really does bother me. Then I can go ahead and change it. And if not, then I will leave it and have it be part of the story of this painting and the fact that it's not a photo. All right, I think, let's see, I'm gonna try to just barely touch the paper and see if I can get just a general wash in so it's not a pure white. That seems to work pretty well. And I apologize, one thing that I should have stated before now is when you are using PanPastels, the reason that they do last so long is a light touch goes a long way. So you'll notice that when I grab pastel, I don't really have any powder coming out of my pans. If you push really hard and dig it in there, you're gonna get the same amount on your sponge, but you're gonna end up with dust in your pan. And that's not what you want. So use a light hand. Really, you're just kind of dabbing it in there. Even though you see it probably looks like I'm putting a lot of pressure, I'm setting it on top and moving it, and you get plenty of pastel that way. So it doesn't take a firm hand at all. It takes a very gentle hand, especially when you're pulling out of the pan. And the same goes with your paper. Here I'm pushing harder because I'm trying to get the pastel off the pan, or off the sponge, pardon me. But in general, I don't use a heavy hand at all. If I am using pastel mat, I put more on the sponge, but I will not, I don't press it hard on the pastel mat, even though it takes a lot more pastel. You still want to do it in gentle layers. Otherwise, you'll end up going through your soft tools very quickly. The rougher papers will tear these up faster, but if you have a gentle hand, these can last a long time as well. I think I have maybe thrown away one soft tool because it was too roughed up to use. Otherwise, I mean, granted, I do have several of these, so I change them out and use different ones at different times, but I have not run out of sponges or had to throw too many away because they've gone bad, as long as you have a gentle hand. So, all right, I really like how this I want to say the word sponge because I was talking about it so long. This pot is looking, so I want to not overdo it. And I would love actually to take a pause. I know we haven't even moved into the blue. We kind of have some crazy colors on here, but at different points when you are working on something, I want you to stop and look at it, take a break, step away, maybe look at it from a different angle. For me, it always looks funny because I'm working at a strange, I don't know, 45 or 50-degree angle, but if I put it up so I can see it more clearly myself, it's not terrible. I am liking it. So I'm going to say, and I want you to say one thing that you are liking about your work. And for me, it is definitely this subtle transition around the vase that makes it look, it kept the whiteness of the vase, which I'm really excited about. So what is one thing that you are liking about your progress so far? And I feel like we spend enough time thinking about what we want to change and what we want to do differently. So I'm not even going to ask that question. If you do need to, if your work ends up getting any dust, there shouldn't be much. As long as you're using a light hand, it shouldn't be much. But if you have any dust, you can just tap it off in the garbage or on a paper towel if you have one available. So, all right, so what I wanted to do was get a tiny bit of blue, and then I want to wipe some of it off. And I actually want the mix of a little bit of that red and yellow in there. So let me show you, I wiped it off on purpose in the red that I had on this page so that it's not a pure bright blue. So, and I just want to do kind of the same thing on this side, but I'm using the blue tones because the shadows on this side are cooler. If you are just getting started in art, drawing, whoops, didn't mean to do that, Mark, but we're gonna go with it, and you are not getting the results that you want, I do want to encourage you, sometimes it takes, or I shouldn't say sometimes, I should say it takes practice to see different things. And I keep sketching, I keep painting, even if it's quick things like this that I have no intention of keeping, because it still teaches me to see, and it still teaches me to recognize subtleties, little variations in color. Maybe when you looked at this, you didn't notice the color differences. And keep in mind, I am looking at a slightly edited version of the reference photo. So if you're not seeing this in the reference photo, that might be why, because I made a few changes to help me with this. But if you are struggling and you're not seeing the results that you want, don't quit. It takes a long time, and I shouldn't say a long time. It takes effort and hours to train your eyes, your hands, and your brain to see what you're wanting to see and to be able to lay on the page what you're wanting to do. So I won't say time, because time can pass, and if you don't work on it, you don't get better. But it does take effort and focus and trying, even if the results don't work out too well. The reason why I started painting, and why I say 6 years ago, I was interested in art in different ways. I certainly did not study techniques very much. I mostly used it as a way to, for gifts and for hobby. I did jewelry making. I did all sorts of different things that I was interested in the moment. But in 2019, I was hit in the head, you could say. I had this moment where I realized so much of what I was spending my time on added no value to my life. I was reading novels just to escape or something, even if I didn't really like them. I just read them, and I was on social media, just scrolling. I was watching videos, video games, whatever the case may be. I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband was working multiple jobs so that I could be a stay-at-home mom. Part of that is because we always wanted that to be the case, and part of it was because it took us 10 years to have our first child. And after 10 years of waiting, I was not going to pay somebody else to watch them grow. So thankfully, my husband and I were on the same page with that, and I was able to be home. But we had one kid after another. Once things were fixed, they were fixed. So we had 4 kids in 4 years, and I went from, having 10 years where it was just my husband and I to 4 new people to focus on. And even though we did, like we had a happy marriage, we had a happy family, I still had that, addiction to things that just did not add any value to my life. And so I would spend free time, and trust me, even with 4 tiny children under 5, we still had free time doing things that added no value to my life. So I was hit with, like I said, it was like I was hit with a brick. All of a sudden, the literal words popped in my head. These are adding no value to my life. In fact, they are stealing it. I apologize for the dog barking. And in that moment, it came to me as well. I used to like doing art. I went to a school for a little bit for video game design because I thought if I like art, I need to have a job in art that is working for somebody else. I know better now. But anyway, so that moment I decided that any downtime that I had, I was going to make a rule that if I was watching something, I was watching an art tutorial video or something that taught me that I could get better at. If I was reading a book, it had to be a book on how to get better at drawing or painting. If I was on social media, it had to be learning from somebody who was teaching on social media about art. And I started with colored pencils because, colored pencils are kind of easy when you have little kids and you know that you're going to be starting and stopping. With paint, it can be harder because you get your whole palette set up and then all of a sudden you've got to stop because nap time is over. So colored pencils was a good way to start with little kids. But that is what got me to this point. I literally took the time that I was wasting and I said, I want to apply this to something I can get better at. Maybe you're watching this and art isn't your true interest, but you enjoy creating something else. I believe we were all created by a creator to create. And so I think that we are happier when we are creating. Maybe you like to woodwork, maybe you like to garden, maybe you like to bake, maybe you are like my son, maybe you love to design games. Whatever it is, you are made different than I am. So, but I would encourage you, if you found this video just because you were scrolling and you have no interest in painting or drawing, find the thing that you like to do and don't just binge watch videos to fill in the time. I want you to find a video that you say to yourself, I'm actually going to try that. I'm going to invest the time, get the supplies, whatever I need to do so I can get better at that. And don't expect your results to happen, the first time, but take the time to get better at it because the years pass. Anyway, I'm turning 40 in a couple days. Actually, by the time this video is shown, I'm probably already 40. So, that's halfway there, as it were. And the time passes regardless. And what do you want to be better at? What do you want to have accomplished? Who is the person that you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because the time passes whether you're working on becoming that person or not. This is probably my biggest passion beyond art, and even more than art, is it breaks my heart to see people spending their time on things that they don't even necessarily want to. They want to get better at this, they want to get better at that, and yet their time isn't going to getting better at that. So any way that I can encourage you and whatever your interest is in, to improve, to spend time on that, it would make me so happy if I could see you 5 years from now and you've done the thing, you've worked at what you wanted to work at and got better at it. You've spent the time on you, because you're your greatest investment. Yes, we have kids, but kids grow up, they move away and they have lives of their own, and I want to be a big part of them doing that. I want to encourage them to grow and live their lives, and I don't want them to feel like they have to live their life for me. But the reality is that once they're gone, it's my husband and I again. And who do we want to be together? Who do we want to be as individuals to support one another in our lives together? So, soapbox over? Probably not. Sorry. All right. I want to add a little bit of yellow down here into the leaves. So that's how I got started painting and drawing. 6 years ago, like I said, pencils, and then my aunt lent me PanPastels to try, and that was a whole new ball game that had me moving on. One thing, if you do have small children, that I do like about PanPastels, and I've never actually seen anybody talk about this, but PanPastels are pretty great for coloring books. So, if you have a young kid, I don't recommend you go out and buy a PanPastel set for them. But if, like me, you're in the middle of a project and you have an extra PanPastels that you're not using in the moment, you can let your kids use them in a coloring book, and they actually stick to the page very well because it's got that grip to it. It does make a mess. Kids are not gentle necessarily with art supplies, so you have to supervise a little. The way I handled it was, I had a studio in the garage that my husband built. This is so sweet. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So he had an office built because he was working a job from home. Before the pandemic, he was working from home, and he had this office space built in the garage. Well, what would happen was he was working 50 hours in this garage office space by himself, and was getting lonely, and I was inside with the kids and getting overstimulated with too much peopling. And so he sacrificed his office space to let it be my studio. So he would work, he put his office in our basement instead and worked in there. And, for a couple hours here and there, the kids would play while he was working, and I would get to go out into the garage studio and have alone time and quiet. But of course, if you have kids, they want to be involved, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So they would come out to the studio curious and wanting to know what mom's doing. And so I would let them pick out 2 colors, and they could use those 2 colors on a coloring page or on a blank page. And without any direction other than 2 colors only and being gentle, they loved being in the studio with me. They didn't have to create masterpieces or have some kind of project, to just enjoy the process. So if you have little kids and they are curious and you're worried about your precious PanPastels that were $8 a piece, that is a way that you can involve them without worrying too much. So just walk them through how to be gentle with them, and let them pick 2 colors. Anything else than that, and you end up with a giant mess. And kids do really well, especially with a new thing, of having some guidance. So pick out 2 colors and go ahead and use a coloring book. All right, so I feel like this is a good time to pause and look again at what I'm liking. I really love how this background of the wood behind the flowers is looking. I like the gaps in the color, that it's not so in your face blue. I like that in the wood down below as well. I might add just a tiny bit, actually. Maybe I'll take it from this page instead. I don't want I don't want a ton of red, I just want a hint of red to put on this side. So even though these are rich, vibrant colors, you can get some subtlety with them. I have done another tutorial where I did a bird painting, and I'll grab that quick in case you haven't seen it. But this one is almost the opposite. It's very bold, it's very bright. We really put the colors on there and let them sing, whereas this one is a little bit more an exercise in subtlety. So depending on what your preference is, you can look at that. I'm liking how the color mixing in these leaves is going. I don't feel like it's getting quite as dark as I want. So I think I'm going to try to mix a little greenish with a tiny bit of black to darken this area. Now I'm not going to do it everywhere because that will ruin it and make it look really cartoony. And actually I should have analyzed first, where do I want the focal point to be? But right now, I'm just going to mass in some spots of color. And what I'll do when I really narrow down the focal point is I will probably use the charcoal to draw that out. So as I pointed out, I don't even have necessarily a focal point yet. Sometimes I have it before I even get started painting. Sometimes I pick it as I go. I feel like you could go with a few different things. You could make this flower down here your focal point. You could make this main middle flower. Since this is so symmetrical, you could maybe get away with that. I kind of really love this flower pot. So it might honestly end up being the pot that's the focal point. We'll see. And once we get there, hopefully I'll be able to talk through how to draw that out. Okay, so I want to make, if I'm looking at the reference, the middle of the sunflowers is more brown, so I'm going to add blue in here to make that more brown. So if you have, if your typical color mixing, if you mix red and yellow, you're going to get orange, or let me say it in the right way. If you mix yellow and red, you'll get orange. If you mix red and blue, you'll get purple. And if you mix yellow into blue, you'll get green. And if you mix them together, you get kind of a brownish grayish color. Now, one pro for a limited palette is you rarely, if you're careful, you rarely end up with mud. And that's because, I'm not taking all sorts of different colors. So no matter what I do, this is going to look cohesive and on purpose. And that's what I like about this. If I had different greens and different golds and all sorts of different colors, it might look more like the picture, the photo, but it won't look cohesive. It won't look like it's all working together. So, all right. Taking a moment just to reassess things. All right, I think I have a little bit of blue left on here, but not very much. I'm going to try to bring out a little bit of movement or shadow value change around the center of this sunflower here. I'm actually going to do the same down here. I am leaning towards making this flower my focal point, which means I'm not going to worry so much about what's going on up here. I'm going to let this flower and the pot itself kind of hold the attention. All right. I think these need a little more attention, even though they're not going to be the focus. I am doing strategic blending in that I'm pulling the color that's already been laid down with just a little bit extra down. This is getting a little too red and a little too thick, but if I take just the tiniest hint of blue, maybe I can get a richer color. Keeping in mind that I am not looking for realistic necessarily. I want them to feel like sunflowers, but they don't have to look like a photo of sunflowers. And you know what? One thing that's bothering me is that all of the marks are the same. And so I think that's part of why I'm not liking what's going on up here. So I am going to blend out some of these marks. I'm using the yellow, but I'm blending it with the other colors. All right. Okay. Now let's see, I need to do the same thing down here. I said this is my focal point, and yet I'm not touching it much. So let's get some marks down here. So right now, once again, I am just using leftover sponge colors, and I am trying to just put it in areas that are maybe like in shadow, or maybe make it look like these petals are behind the petals in front of it. So I'm not necessarily painting it all yellow because it's a yellow flower. I'm not always getting color directly out of the pan as much as I'm blending what is on here in strategic ways. Not blending everything, just certain areas. Let's see if I can get a little bit bolder of a yellow here. Actually, I'm gonna add a little bit more down here. What you may have noticed at this point that I have not used this tool. It is very rare that I use these soft tools. Pretty much always just use the sponge. That's just my preferred tool. Some people prefer the long-handled sticks. I like to get up close and personal, apparently. I have also used, when I was very attention to detail, I used makeup brushes, specifically a very tiny eyeshadow brush. And that is how, if you look at my work, my website is mollyvandelistart.com. If you look at some of my work, especially European robins, you'll see all that detail was actually all PanPastel, not pencil, with a makeup brush. So you can get a lot of detail with one, but it doesn't really work on paper like this. It does have to be that grippy paper. All right. I think it improved the overall look by messing up my sunflowers, even though that sounds strange. And I think I've put all the PanPastel that I want on here. Now, I'm just going to add in some marks here, but I'm not going through and drawing every line. I am making scribbly marks. If your art teacher told you not to scribble, she was wrong. I scribble all the time. So I'm just making some strategic marks here. I don't care if it gets a bit cartoony looking. I kind of like that style. And but I'm not going to outline everything. So it's clear that this is the main side. I'm going to use some marks that draw the attention that way, but I'm not going to color in everything. I think I'll use some of it up here, but I'm going to use a lighter hand. So I'm barely touching the paper. Just enough to make it feel a little bit more real, to draw out some of those shadowy areas, but not to draw attention away from the other corner. So I am, like I said, I am scribbling. I am not outlining. I am rotating the charcoal around the page so that the marks don't all look the same. All right, let's see. This is that stage where artists say they overwork things, so I'm trying very hard to embrace the messy and not overwork it, but to still draw out some of those darks. Okay, let's see, step back. It's good to take a lot of breaks if you're worried about overworking something. So now, one thing that is good and bad about the charcoal is if you don't have it at a fine point, you can't be very precise, and I am purposely choosing this as a tool because of that, because I don't want to be precise here. I don't want it to look like a painting, and because my tendency is to overwork and over realisticize, for lack of a better word. I make things overly realistic in a bad way, in a lifeless way. So I am purposely using tools that have big edges and not a fine point that I can control all that well. So tip, if you have a problem with too realistic of paintings, too detailed, you get started on maybe a little bit and you try to make that look as real as possible, and then you realize you still have a whole painting left, then use bigger tools. Get the color laid down before you criticize or judge your work and decide what you like and don't like. Take your time, get color everywhere before you start deciding what marks you like, what marks you need to get rid of, so on and so forth. So as you saw, I put yellow down and I realized all of my, red marks, all my lines around the petals were, a little bit different, but pretty much the same. So it was flat and kind of lifeless, and I didn't like that. And so, but I waited until the end before I made any changes to that, before I made sure that was really how I felt about this painting. So let's see. I am liking the energetic marks. Look, I'm not even necessarily trying to follow the petals themselves, and I really like the result when I twist the charcoal around. So, pro tip from the moment, turning the charcoal as you move really gives it a whole lot more fun look. Okay, let's see. Oh, I need just a couple marks or two over here. I don't want it to take away from what's going on down here. But that doesn't mean I want to leave it with nothing. So, all right, I am liking this painting. I hope you are too. Please let me know if you have questions, if there's something else you want to know or want to see, I would love to continue making these videos in a way that is beneficial for you. The only way that I got better at art was by watching tutorials like this. So I am all for helping you get better at painting, especially with PanPastels, but other media as well. So if you have questions or things that you want to know more about, let me know. Have a good day.